this section, we're going to solve quadratics by square rooting. Let's recall what a square root is. A square root is figured out by finding the number that when multiplied by itself gives you the number underneath the square root symbol. So, the answer to square root of 4 is 2 because 2 times 2 is 4. It's actually a plus or minus 2 because negative 2 times negative 2 is 4. The square root of 81 is 9, or plus or minus 9. It could be a positive 9 or a negative 9. A negative times a negative 9 times a negative 9 is also 81. The square root of 16 over 49 is plus or minus 4 over 7. Because the square root of 16 is 4 and the square root of 49 is 7. The square root of 5 and the square root of 7 cannot be found. You would need to use a calculator or estimate these using square roots that you already know. To solve a quadratic equation using square roots, we can only do this if there's no linear term. So that means that there is no x term. There's no vx. There's only an x squared and a constant being number by itself. The steps of doing this process is to get the x squared alone. Once you have the x squared alone, you take the square root of each side. Then you simplify that square root to the nearest hundredth if it doesn't come out even. So let's use those steps for this first problem. Getting the x squared alone, I would divide by 2 on both sides. X squared equals 4. Now I will square root both sides. X is equal to plus or minus 2, meaning my solution is either 2 or it is negative 2. 2 times 2 is 4 and negative 2 times negative 2 is 4. So both of these are the answer. In my next problem, I need to get the x squared by itself, so I divide by 8 on both sides. X squared is equal to 2. Square root both sides to get the x completely by itself, and x is equal to plus or minus the square root of 2. The square root of 2 does not come out evenly, so I need to use a calculator to be able to figure out what the solution is in terms of the decimal. I'd hit 2 and then the square root. That will give me the decimal. To the nearest hundredth, would be 1.41. So I could write this also as x equals plus or minus 1.41. On my next equation, I need to get the x squared by itself. I will do so by adding 1. X squared is equal to 1. Square root both sides. X is equal to plus or minus 1. My two solutions then are 1 and negative 1. On my next example, I would need to add 40 to get the x squared by itself. X squared is equal to 49. Then I would square root both sides and get the answer x is equal to plus or minus 7. In problem number 5, I will get the x squared by itself by first adding 9 to both sides. That gives me 25x squared equals 9. Then I would divide by 25 on both sides. X squared equals 9 over 25. Square root both sides, and I get the answer plus or minus 3 over 5. The square root of 9 is 3, and the square root of 25 is 5. Alright, I have just a few more problems like this. We're going to continue to get the x squared by itself. So I do so by adding 5 to both sides. That gives me 4x squared equals 25. Divide by 4 on both sides. x squared equals 25 over 4. Square root both sides. I get x is equal to plus or minus the square root of 25, which is 5, and the square root of 4, which is 2. On this next problem, I will minus 5 on both sides to get the x squared by itself. That gives me 2x squared is equal to negative 16. Divide by 2 on both sides. X squared is equal to negative 8. When you square root both sides, there is no solution to this. There's no real roots because nothing times itself will give you a negative 8. So we need to write the answer, no real roots. We cannot square root a negative number. The next problem looks a little different, but when I look at it closely, I notice I have like terms. So 5 and negative 9 give me a negative 4x squared. Then what I can do to get x squared by itself is divide by negative 4. X squared equals positive 1. Square root both sides. X is equal to plus or minus 1. In this last problem I have, we would just simply add 4 to both sides to get the x squared by itself. Square root both sides. I don't know the square root of 13, so I'd write the answer either plus or minus the square root of 13, or we could change it to a decimal. 13 square root 3.61. So plus or minus 3.61. Either answer is correct.